Okay, everybody, Pierce Redmond here for Porkins Policy Radio, PorkinsPolicyReview.com, and I'm recording a little special little episode here. I don't know if you could really categorize this as an episode per se. It'll be kind of short, and I'm very much doing this on the fly, but you might have seen yesterday I was tweeting about the down in Palm Beach, the state attorney for Palm Beach. This is in the 15th Judicial Circuit down in Palm Beach. The office of the state attorney of Dave Aronberg released a ton of documents related to the 2006 to 2008 prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein. So I'll link up to this if you didn't see it on Twitter. There's an article in the Sun Sentinel that breaks down what's in this, but it's basically they've set up like a portal on the state attorney's website where you can go and download really just a shit ton of documents. They have audio from interviews, voicemails from people involved, like Haley Robson and others. There is the full walkthrough of Epstein's Palm Beach house down on El Brillo Way. The full 3-part walkthrough, which has sort of disappeared from the internet. There's all sorts of video interviews of victims. Of course, their faces are blurred out, so you can't see who they are. And tons and tons of the files, the investigation. So there's all sorts of material in there related to the case. There's everything they seized from his garbage. There are a seemingly endless supply of MySpace screenshots from various victims involved in this. Lots of stuff that we do sort of know about. This is stuff that has been out there, and I think if I remember correctly, the Sun Sentinel kind of did make mention that all of these records, this is quoting from the Sun Sentinel, all of these records have been previously released in response to public record requests. So yeah, this is stuff that I think you probably could have gotten it if you sent in a request with the state attorney's office, but I guess in response to so many requests, they decided to sort of put it all up in one neat little area. Two quick things that we should point out. I tweeted about this as well. Number one, Aronberg wanted everybody to know that first and foremost, he had nothing to do with the investigation that resulted in Epstein pleading guilty 12 years ago to prostitution charges instead of federal crime. So obviously distancing himself from the toxicity of the Epstein prosecution. And obviously there are, a lot of people that are still quite tainted from this, and Aronberg wants to distance himself. And secondly, Aronberg, and I'm quoting from the Sun Sentinel, Aronberg said he had no access to one particular file that is sought by special prosecutors appointed last year by Governor Ron DeSantis. Quote, I have never seen or had access to the Epstein grand jury transcripts, as the state attorney's office has never possessed them, Aronberg wrote. So that is not in this new release of documents. So I mean, that's interesting. Where is that? And it seems interesting, at least in the phrasing of this in the article, that this is something that even Governor Ron DeSantis can't find, or the people that were appointed by the governor haven't been able to locate the Epstein grand jury transcripts. I don't know. Maybe I'm misreading that. I'm not sure, but it's interesting. Anyway, there is a lot there. I tweeted about this yesterday. There's a lot in there. We should really, just sort of, start by combing through all of it. I will most likely download everything that I can. I'll try and post a lot of it on the site, but I mean, some of these would be kind of fairly large files. I don't see an easy way to download the video, so I don't know if I'll be able to do that, but I will try my best in the next couple of weeks probably to post some of this stuff. But again, it's all there. I don't think that it's going to be taken down anytime soon or at all. I think this is obviously something that Aronberg felt he had to do, probably under pressure from so many people wanting to see what's in these case files. Now, like I said, this is stuff that a lot of this is reports, police reports, internal memos and stuff from law enforcement that are it's confirming or not confirming, but it's where we get a lot of these interesting stories about Epstein, what they found in his trash, for instance, different. People have talked about this before, him sending flowers and things like that to victims that were in school plays. You can see the actual notes that, people, I don't think it was Epstein him personally, but other people working for him about, sending flowers to so-and-so. But there are some audio interviews of, I think, Juan Alesi, who is worked for Epstein in his household. He's a guy that also at one point stole, I think, around $2,000 from Epstein, and also stole a gun, a Glock, that Epstein kept, I think, on a bookshelf in his main office down in Palm Beach. Epstein had these security cameras installed in that room, so there are pictures of Alesi taking this stuff. He confronted him. Alesi was dealing with all sorts of emotional problems, but I believe there are there are recordings of interviews with him. The voicemails are interesting. I sort of was just listening to the Robson ones, but it's just, again, it's interesting to sort of see or hear who these people are, what they sounded like. You begin to kind of flesh this all out. But importantly, there undoubtedly is going to be lots of little nuggets sprinkled in here that we glossed over, that other people didn't care about, that are important and that are interesting. And I know I sounded maybe a little, bitter yesterday on Twitter, but I meant what I was saying when I was talking about the fact that there's a lot of people out there selling, and I mean that in a very literal sense, selling the inside story, selling these big scoops on Epstein and these sort of vast conspiracies that only they have ever been able to uncover. And while I think there's a lot of phonies and con artists out there that are selling bullshit to people that mean well and that are interested in this, and then there are some people that are also, selling not in a bad way, selling solving the sort of vast conspiracy. And I admit that Epstein is vast in its scope and what's the network, how it operated. But it's interesting how that has really kind of taken on a life of its own. And I've talked about this before. I don't want to bore you all with this. But the sort of fascination with the spying, the Israelis, the Mossad connection, chasing down all the money. And again, always important. We should be doing that. I'm not trying to dissuade people from looking into that. But, and I don't know, maybe this is just me. This is my own personal thing. And it sort of reminds me a bit of any sort of large scale conspiracy, right? Or conspiracy topic. If you look at Oklahoma City, 9/11, JFK, what have you. There, within that, there's always these subsections, right? There's always the people with 9/11 that are obsessed with the buildings, right? How did they collapse? And it's all their obsession is physics and controlled demolitions and thermite in Building 7 and whatnot. And then there are people that are obsessed with, the sort of the San Diego side of this. I have always been interested in that with Al-Midar and Al-Hamzi, what they were doing in San Diego. There are people that are interested in just what was going down in Florida with 9/11, Muhammad Atta and the flight schools and whatnot. And for me, I think that's always what's fascinated me most when it comes to the Epstein stuff is what was going down in Florida, in Palm Beach. And in part, that's because it's the one instance where we actually had the police do as thorough an investigation as one could ever imagine when it comes to someone committing crimes of this nature. They did a very thorough investigation. They really were digging into this more than anyone else had done up until that point, obviously, because nobody really cared, or anytime it was reported, it was for whatever reason was sort of swept under the rug. But the Palm Beach police did do a great job. And it's really the only thing out there that we have to look at. So, and I think that gets glossed over a lot because it's maybe not as sexy as reading about the what Israeli spy told some YouTube con artist about related to Epstein, or whatever the sort of secret sources that so-and-so has on Twitter and feeding all this interesting information and building this grand narrative about Epstein and the Clintons and Hillary and whatever, right? I mean, that's but going through police records, going through old interviews and whatnot, I don't know, it's not as sexy, perhaps, but I think that there's actually a lot more interesting information there. And just today, I was going through some of this stuff, and again, it's vast. I mean, there is so much there to go through. Easily, I would say just from, there are 24 parts of what they've listed as the state file redacted and released Jeffrey Epstein. So there's 24 parts of that, PDFs. Easily there, I would just guess, and this is probably on the low end, maybe about 2,000 pages of files. Not to mention, probably just at a glance, over 20 audio files of various things. There's a whole bunch of videos. I mean, there really is just a lot of stuff to go through. And to think that, oh, no, we've heard all this before, nothing to see here, and just sort of skip over it because you can make, more of a splash by talking about the kind of crazy conspiracy stuff. You miss a lot. And anyway, I was going through some of this earlier today, and this is partly what made me want to record this little thing. I just went to, because I was clicking around on these different, redacted files from the prosecution. And a lot of them are, it's mind-numbing going through old MySpace posts, and talking about nothing really. Then you get to some interesting police reports of, I assume, victims and friends of victims. It's interesting just sort of seeing, they're drinking or whatever, or smoking weed, and they get pulled over, and not, that's not like to malign anybody or oh, look at this, but it paints a picture. You begin to kind of see who these people are. They're no longer kind of faceless entities. They're not just victims or these names that we don't really understand. They're real people. They make mistakes. They fuck up. They smoke weed. They hang out with the wrong people. Whatever. They're real teenagers, and that's interesting. But I scrolled down to the It's at the bottom of the PDFs. It's Epstein Supplemental Redacted. And I just clicked on it, just curious as to what was in there. It is one of the shorter PDFs. It's only 89 pages, so you can kind of go through it and, feel like you accomplished something for the day, as opposed to the, 200 pages of MySpace stuff and weird, letters back and forth between lawyers and stuff. And as I was scrolling through it, I got down to page 7, and that sort of caught my eye because it was a photocopy from like a yellow legal pad. I'm not sure. I think this is either from the prosecution or I think it's actually from the Palm Beach PD. I think. I'm not, look at it for yourself, but it sounds like, oh no, maybe this is, you can tell how unprepared I am. Anyway, go to it because it's really interesting. You've got, there's some names and stuff is redacted. But then you see like this little note, burglary, and then in parentheses it says mob, and then 2 question marks. Then underneath that it's a man in the bushes. Again, parentheses, nothing reported. Then on the side there's a little note that says private Wackenhut, 3 incidents on surveillance, ninja, okay? And then under that it says PI with Gambino family ties. So this obviously jumped out to me. And then underneath that, so that's on page 7. Okay, if you scroll down to page 8, there's an email. This was sent on March 26, 2010 at 9:02 a.m. It's from Barbara Burns, who was, I'm not sure if she still is, but at the time, she was one of the assistant state attorneys down in Palm Beach. She was in charge around 2010. She was in charge of the Epstein case at that time when he was trying to end his house arrest early. And, he was coming up with all of these various reasons why he's such a great citizen and he should be released from house arrest. There's a famous email, or, famous if you follow this, right? Where Barbara Burns is she's emailing with her boss, the state attorney, Michael McAuliffe, I think is how you pronounce it. And she refers, referring to Epstein, she says, the dragon keeps raising its ugly head. Talking about, just how much she was, I guess, annoyed by him. But anyway, Barbara Burns sends this email to Michael McAuliffe. The subject is it says, forward, confidential. And I'm going to read from, not all of it, but just the part that's sort of really relevant, because it's referring to whatever was written on this legal pad. Quote, as per your request, I am forwarding the following summary. RE, the burglary/attempted burglary allegations. The Palm Beach PD were surprised to hear this and indicated that there has never been such complaint or complaints since Epstein was placed on community control. I spoke further with Jack Goldberger, this is one of Epstein's attorneys, and he indicated that Epstein employs private security through Wackenhut, and they intercepted this person who was dressed in black like a ninja and hiding in some bushes. They chased him to a dark Chrysler 300 and took down the tag info. From there, they were able to find out that it was registered to a PI that has been associated/linked to Attorney Rothstein and the Gambino family. I spoke with DOC Community Control Supervisor Officer Gaines, and he advised me that late last week, Epstein informed him of a similar incident. Officer Gaines went on to say that he spoke with Epstein in late September or possibly October of last year and explained to him that he received, quote, the best deal ever heard of for someone in his situation, end quote, and that he warned him to follow every condition by the letter so as not to get violated. If violated, he could very well be put on an ankle bracelet, which would be even more of a restriction to him. Now, that email continues on. And again, I encourage you to read it. But, this a lot to kind of just unpack right here. Number one, if Wackenhut sounds familiar, that is because it is a very, I would, hazard to call them infamous, an infamous security company. They are now, I believe, they go by G4S, Secure Solutions, but it was founded down in Florida by George Wackenhut. It was a private security company. They're involved in all sorts of shady activity. They were one of the, Omar Mateen, who is the 2016 Orlando nightclub shooting. He worked for G4S from 2007 until his death. So that's a weird one. And admittedly, I don't know nearly enough about Wackenhut. But if people are familiar with Danny Casolaro and the Inslaw and the Octopus and his whole story, Wackenhut features very prominently in what Casolaro was investigating. So it's it doesn't surprise me, I guess, that Epstein would be would be hiring people from Wackenhut to do his security. I mean, they certainly have that sort of, shady, I don't know, this is sort of stupid, but like deep state, feel to them, right? This is Wackenhut is somebody that a serial sex offender, who's connected to everybody from, Donald Trump to Bill Clinton would probably hire, right? But, to my knowledge, this has never been previously reported on. I had never heard of this before. Now, I don't know if that's totally true. I mean, again, I think that, a lot of these documents, I don't know if they were out there, but I think that there were definitely news outlets that had gone through a lot of this stuff. I don't know. Maybe this was just sort of like one of those weird things that happens. I'm not sure. But still, he's got the Wackenhut thing is almost like, oh, whatever, right? Like, that's just who you hire if you're a shady, greasy scumbag, right? But this guy hiding in the bushes, dressed like a ninja, Epstein is telling this officer Gaines that there was a similar incident that had happened earlier about this. But the interesting thing there is that it was at least the car, this Chrysler, that the Wackenhut security, I guess, chased this guy down to, but he escaped. Is then is registered to a PI that has been associated, linked with attorney Rothstein and the Gambino family. So that's why I guess we got this thing about these handwritten notes about the mob, the Gambino family. But Rothstein, that name should be familiar to faithful listeners. That is referring to Scott Rothstein, who is, as far as I know, still in prison for his massive sort of a Ponzi scheme that he ran. Scott Rothstein is a disbarred lawyer right now, but he was a very prominent, powerful lawyer down in Florida. This is his law firm was sort of famous. I've talked about this before. I'll link up to it because it's kind of a convoluted story. But he was sort of selling. He would get like a big case, right? And he would sort of sell shares in what the settlement would be to investors. I mean, the whole thing, it's like so illegal. But he would sort of sell shares in that, and people would kind of invest in the outcome of various cases. One of these cases, these high-profile cases that he definitely was talking about, bragging to his shareholders or buyers, was the Epstein case. Brad Edwards, longtime attorney who's represented many of the victims, worked for Scott Rothstein's law firm down in Florida. At one point, Epstein was suing Scott Rothstein's law firm. He eventually dropped the suit, and I think even Rothstein admitted that Edwards didn't know anything about what was really going on. This was all me. I was just sort of using him. Although, it does, I don't know, it raises questions, right? Roger Stone was also a big component of Rothstein's law firm. He worked for Scott Rothstein. He famously, when Roger Stone called up Elliot Spitzer's father, who I believe at the time was suffering from dementia, and he threatened that he was going to destroy him and whatnot. That was from Roger Stone's New York office. That was paid for by Scott Rothstein. He was a consultant for Scott Rothstein. Again, there's a whole lot there. Roger Stone later, was part of the lawsuit against Scott Rothstein. He's named in, I think it's Roger Stone is named in like a lawsuit that includes Epstein's name as well. That's how I kind of stumbled into it. But there's a whole story there about Scott Rothstein and what's going on. And, here we go. We have the Palm Beach police looking into this, and we've got state's attorneys talking about that there's some guy dressed like a ninja, or at least in all black. He's probably not actually dressed like a ninja. Some PI hiding out in the bushes, talking about some sort of possible burglary. I mean, was he trying to break in and get, notes or documents or what? Very, very interesting. It just raises, and again, it's like there's this whole other story there. We've never heard about this. Epstein hiring Wackenhut. I mean, this should be, this is conspiracy catnip out there. And yet all, these people that are selling you a bunch of, stories from their inside sources. Nobody's talking about that. No one's talking about Wackenhut, who was this PI with Gambino ties. It's interesting. Presumably, not everything has been released by Dave Aronberg here, right? And things are redacted, including on these handwritten notes. I mean, they have to know who the hell this PI is. That it's not like it's registered to some unnamed PI with ties to Rothstein and the Gambinos, so they know who this guy is, which is interesting. But anyway. Just a little tiny nugget there. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that you will find if you actually take the time and go through some of these things. And, like I said, I picked this at random. I was just interested in what was in these supplemental stuff. And, as I was sort of scrolling through it, I came across another thing. Again, just sort of scrolling, looking, seeing what's in, for me at least, when I'm researching Epstein or anything like with a lot of documents, right? Part of it is literally just scrolling at random, and maybe you see something that's interesting. That was interesting to me. It was just photocopied from a legal pad. And it was even in color as well. So it really, kind of pops out, that yellow legal pad. When you scroll, you just see something, oh, this looks interesting. Let me see. Because again, sometimes you get used to, you can just tell that's a police report, that's some sort of a lawyer legal law firm document back and forth, but a legal pad, like handwritten notes, that's interesting. Anyway, as I was scrolling down, again, this is in color. So they're scanning all these things in color. It was like a letter to Lana Belov, I can't pronounce her last name, Belolovic, who was she was again another assistant state attorney for Palm Beach County. You'll see her name on all sorts of various documents related to this. I'll also, just because I think it's good to, again, put faces to these names so these people aren't just names that we read about. We can kind of understand who they are. There's a good post in the Palm Beach Post. They put up a little article, and it's just the photos of the local players in the Jeffrey Epstein saga. So you can see what these people look like. Anyway, there's like this letter typed out to Belovlak, and then at the top in the right-hand corner is like a little blue Post-it note. It says, "Do you want any response to be issued? Thanks, Barb." And then underneath it just says no. So I assume that this was being forwarded to Barbara Burns. And in it is just this like weird, rambling letter from some guy, just some like random person. And and he talks I'll just sort of give you a little flavor for it. I'm at a loss for words. This is from this letter. I'm at a loss for words and trying to hold the tears back after reading about the sickening details of billionaire Jeffrey Epstein's case. I have to say, in this instance, your office, along with the entire judicial system, failed the people miserably by not adequately punishing a chronic child monster and rapist. This man of wealth and prestige preyed upon innocent poor girls, all caps, and systematically raped them at his will. And then, he just sort of goes on. They mention, he says, I'm sure you've read Conchita Sarnoff's piece in the Daily Beast, referencing all this. And then at the bottom it says, he signs it, a concerned patriot. P.S. Eagerly await any, all caps, type of response. And then it just says and in a dash. I don't know what, maybe something got cut off. And then he signs it with his email. It's just some Yahoo account. And then if you scroll down, you can see the letter that I guess it was sent, that was sent to the state attorney. The letter is dated July 31st, 2010. There's another stamp on this letter, and I think that's probably maybe when it arrived at the state attorney's office, and that's marked as August 4th, 2010. And then you can see, I don't know if I want to give this guy's name out. I don't think it's a real name. You can go and look at this if you want to. But, on the return address, he gives this fake name. And then it says, the return address is 123 Reality Boulevard, Justice, California. This, probably nothing, right? This is just probably a whack job, but, albeit, he's a concerned patriot, right? Sending a letter in. It's just interesting that this is included, that they, read through this, that there was some sort of a discussion about it. And, it's just, again, very interesting. Little nugget out there. That we didn't know about previously. And I think, like a lot of the stuff that's in all of these files, will get kind of swept under the rug. And I'll say it again, this is the only case that we have to look at. There is probably some sort of an investigation going on by the Southern District here in New York. Jeffrey Berman, who's sort of in charge of the investigation. He keeps talking about it like it's real. I don't really put a lot of stock into this. There's a lot of hay that's made about Prince Andrew doesn't want to cooperate. No shit. Why would he? He's nothing to gain from cooperating. And again, it's like, that's what we can talk about. Whereas all of these public records, I don't see anybody talking about this in the media. Outside of some of the outlets down in Florida around there that are genuinely interested in this case, I don't see any of the usual suspects on Twitter, including people related, and active in the case, talking about all of this. So it's easy for this stuff to kind of get brushed aside. And again, this is all free. You don't have to pay for. You don't have to go through Pacer or anything else to get all this stuff. It's all there. You don't have to pay anybody. Just go. You go to the library, print all this stuff out if you wanted to. So anyway, interesting stuff there. I don't know what to make of this. This PI ninja mobbed up. A private investigator working for Rothstein trying to break into Epstein's house. Epstein's hiring Wackenhut to look after him. But again, if nothing else, it kind of fleshes out this strange story of at least what was going on in Florida. We know for a fact what was going on in Florida because we've got all of these things here. A lot of what we hear about New York, the island, the stuff that we're hearing that supposedly was taking place in the 1980s. That's coming from, sometimes it's not the most reputable sources. It's people that have pretty serious agendas. Now they might They might have been in Epstein's orbit. They might have been close to Epstein. They might have just, known stuff, but they have an axe to grind, or there's some sort of an agenda there. It's coming from that, or it's just coming from people that may not even be real. Again, everyone's got these inside sources. It's a lot of speculation. It's a lot of piecing together weird things. Whereas here's something concrete. Here's again, and this should be fodder for conspiracy theorists. Wackenhut. There we go. He's got these security guards who, they can't be. I don't know. They're not doing that good a job, right? 2 incidents where you've got these, someone's trying to break in. They can't even catch this guy. He, like a ninja, just sort of vanishes, gets into his car. There's also, again, on this handwritten note, there's all this stuff about why wasn't this reported? They're not following up on this. There's 2 incidents. Is there some sort of a mob connection? I mean, these are all relevant questions. Is this just Scott? And this is 2010. This is, I think, and I would have to kind of double check on some of that, but this is, I believe, when Rothstein's whole kind of empire began crumbling around him. If you follow the Rothstein story, when January 27th, 2010 is when he pleaded guilty. This would be, let's see when this was. This was March 26th, 2010. So this would have been after, right? This would have been after Rothstein pleads guilty. So that's even more interesting. He's got these people going around doing jobs for him while he's facing all this prison time. Again, what's the full scope of that story? Or if for nothing else, I mean, it's just maybe it's one of these sort of bizarre instances in the Epstein case, but it's something real. We can actually point to it. Unlike a lot of the stuff that's out there that's just bullshit, really. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling. I don't really have much to say on this other than I've never heard of this incident before, and I think it's really interesting. And I think more people should dig into it. And again, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Maybe someone else has seen this or reported on this. If so, let me know. Because it's a strange little, if nothing else, footnote, although there's got to be something more to it. But anyway, I'll kind of leave it there. I think I'll probably be doing, hopefully, some more of, just little snippet, little shows like this when I can, as I sort of dive through all of these public records that have been made available by the state attorney down in Palm Beach. But once again, if you enjoy this, if you'd like to support my work, you can always go sign up on Patreon. It's just patreon.com/Pierce Redmond. You can become a subscriber for as little as $1 a month, and that single solitary dollar, of course, gives you access to the monthly bonus podcast. We just did a really fun show, actually, with Chuck Ocelli, that we sort of started talking about the new Star Wars movie, and then we just kind of digressed and went off about Disney and its racist roots and how much better Star Trek is. But it's a fun show, actually. We get to some really interesting topics and we have fun while talking about some kind of heavy stuff as well. So check that out if you have not already. And I talked about this a little bit on the bonus that bonus podcast, but I am working on the book. That is, I've sort of been kind of stuck in terms of where I'm going with it, but I've sort of had a change of heart, and I'm changing the direction of the book, and I'm thinking of writing it as a novel. So, and I don't really have much else to say specifically on that, but it just seems like it's a story, as more and more kind of comes out, there's no way you could ever write I don't think I could really write the nonfiction book that I want to write about Epstein. I think it's more material for a novel. And the more I kind of learn and read about the Florida stuff, I mean, I love the idea of kind of setting it down there. I think there's so much. There's just so much with just Florida, or if I was going to write a nonfiction book, and maybe I will at some point, I think it would almost just be focused on the Florida aspect of this, because there's a lot there, and I think what was going on down there is a template for everything else. And again, it's the only window we have into this. But anyway, that is sort of where I'm at with the book. I hope I'll have some more updates on that. And I hope to have some more these little sort of mini podcasts as well. And I think we'll have some bigger ones too. Joseph Flatley, we're going to do something with him soon on his new podcast, the so-called Prophet from Pittsburgh, which I encourage people to check out. But anyway, thank you all so much for listening, and I'll be talking to you very soon.